Vernon, you ready for us? Thank you. Okay, evening everyone. I trust you well. Good evening to those joining us by the live stream again. We're now in week 7, and I know it's week 7 because we've gone through the roller coaster. We've gone down the 5 weeks topics, and now this is now the second week of making our way up the roller coaster ride as well. So week 7 looks at new experiences. Last week we looked at new perceptions as well. So it's wow. It's a given. This uphill can be very difficult as well. But let's pray. Lord, thank you again for this journey. I think sometimes, Lord, there are moments that one just wants you to come and, I guess, wave your wand and we'll be okay. But we know that with you, life many times doesn't work that way. There are moments that we do experience that instantaneous healing. But majority of the time you invite us onto a journey and into a journey with you. And yet there's the pressure of the society around us that says to you, just take a tablet and it will be okay. It will take the pain away. We know all these things only suppresses what actually needs to come out. And so, Holy Spirit, we say thank you for your presence and what you are drawing out of us and making us aware of. And so we ask that you hold our hand, take us by the hand as we make our way up this hill. In Jesus' name, Amen. I read to you from Jeremiah, which is the reading that the Maya Clinic chooses for this session. Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 12 and 13. And they will come and shout for joy on the heights of Zion. They will rejoice in the bounty of the Lord. The corn, the new wine, and the oil, the young of the flocks and herds. They will be like a well-watered garden, and they will sorrow no more. Then maidens will dance and be glad, young men and old as well. I will turn their mourning into gladness. I will give them comfort and joy instead of sorrow. I will satisfy the priest with abundance, and my people will be filled with my bounty, declares the Lord. It's really a beautiful image of restoration. Beautiful image of the journey that people go through in terms of destruction when Judah is destroyed, and eventually when people will make their journey back. And that's 70 years later, hey? But the 70 years later is only the rebuilding of the city. But there's this beautiful image of what you look forward to and what you're preparing, not just for yourself, but also for your children. And so the new experiences starts already with the new perceptions. You have to see it. Even though you might not be living in it yet, you have to see it. And so, how has your new, you don't have to answer this, but how has your new perceptions been going since last week? Are you able to see yourself in a more, I guess, positive light? Can you see that having a knock-on effect on those around you and your family? Because it starts with oneself. Remember, codependency has always been about changing the outside to make peace on the inside. Here we're starting on the inside, so that it will be a better environment on the outside. And so today our focus is on new experiences. And so the next step in our recovery process is to create new experiences based on your new perceptions. And the intention is that our new perceptions might not be something that we can follow through all of it immediately, but it's something that we are journeying towards. So, too, our new experiences, the expectation is not for us to do it everything all at once, but one at a time. And so these new experiences will not be bound up by your past. All your relationships will be affected by the new you. Can you feel the new you? All your relationships will be affected by the new you. Beside each person and group below, describe the relationship you would like to have. And so we're getting again into this kind of perception first. And so what you notice on the way up and why it's hard, it requires work from our side. It's requiring work from our side. And so part of this new experience here, I'm going to ask you to complete some of these sections here. For instance, here it says here, beside each person or group below, describe the relationship you would like to have. For example, with your spouse. I want to have a mutual meeting of needs. I don't want to be afraid of conflict, but able to resolve it. It's putting down on paper, what is it that you want in the relationship, in this instance with your spouse? What is a healthy? And so it's giving you an example here of what that looks like. In terms of our relationship with our children, I want to be aware of their love tanks and meet the needs I'm responsible for. Remember, if you take the responsibility away from the children themselves, they grow up thinking, well, I don't need to take responsibility for that. So now what you need to do, you need to then identify what those things are, depending on what the age they find themselves in. I want to stop smothering them. Now think of it this way, if you are a child maybe, if your mother or your father is smothering you, how do you respond to that? What would you want out of the relationship? Some children might actually love that because they can get more out of it as well. Number 3, in our relationship with our friends, for instance, I want to develop a network of support. I don't want to take responsibility for all of their problems. Parents, relationship with our parents, for instance, I will honor them by regular contact, but also realize I'm not responsible for their happiness. I don't want to keep seeking their approval for everything. And I think it's important to notice here that one is not responsible for another person's feelings. The issue about our codependent journey is that in one's own experience, I'm always concerned about the other person's feeling. And so if I've grown up, and my own experience was that to make sure that others are happy. And so if they're not happy, what must I do to make you happy, that you can be happy? What is the outside thing I need to do to keep you happy? And that meant suppressing my own happiness, things that would make me happy. So, what are those things? If you are the parent, recognize that in your relationship with your children. Are you wanting them to come and seek your approval for everything? And why is that? Is it that they're afraid they can't take responsibility without your permission? If you have siblings, for those of us who have siblings, for instance, I want to share my honest feelings with them. Are you able to do that? I come from a family that's very, I think, in one way we're close-knit. So 2 boys, 3 boys in total, 1 girl. And so we hug and those things, closeness from that, but not a closeness of sharing our feelings. In terms of, I'm angry because of what you said or what you've done. Why? Because we've grown up to make sure that you're happy. So I'm not going to express the negative side of it. Are you honest with your feelings with them without the intention of wanting to hurt them? I want to accept them for where they are in their recovery process, even if they haven't begun. Are you able to express that to your siblings? In-laws, if you have in-laws still. I want to encourage my spouse to have a healthy relationship with his or her parents. I don't want to let them interfere with our having a healthy, independent family. What are you asking? You're asking your spouse to take responsibility of the relationship with his or her parents. But to own that. But to also be able to voice what is healthy and what's not healthy. Again, what are we talking about? What I'd like to have. Remember that. And then for colleagues, for those of us in whichever area we're working in, not just in terms of employment, whether we volunteer as well. For instance, I don't want to be dumped on or used by them. I want to be more positive toward them. Who feel that they are kind of just dumped on? Because don't worry, that we can ask. Grant is okay, he'll do it. He won't say no. And how many of us do that? We'll take on more, we'll take on more, we'll take on more. And how do we feel when we say to them, sorry, I can't do it? How do we feel? Guilty? So we're asking it for us to, what are the things you'd like to have, like to see in your relationship? So again, it's asking us to work through that. Page 2 invites us to, how will you need to change in order to move these relationships in a healthy direction? And so if this is what you'd like to have in your relationships, how will you need to change? Not how will you need to change them, how will I need to change in order to move these relationships into a healthy direction? And here it gives us a couple of examples. For instance, when I'm angry about something, I will discuss it with my spouse in a calm and rational manner. Sorry? Why not? Why can't you be angry at God? God's the one that's kind of placed all these emotions in us in the first place. I'm sure His love is broad enough to be able to take that anger as well. Because He understands where it comes from. So for instance, when I'm angry about something, I will discuss it with my spouse in a calm and rational manner. So it's asking us to change. What I would sometimes do is first think, okay, if I'm going to say this, what will the response be? And if that's going to be the response, and if we know our partners in a certain way, we know that it can become a very possibly drawn out, and we might not get to some kind of expression of what we're really feeling. And because we've worked it out in our heads already, then we eventually say, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to express it. Or it might just come out in a very unhealthy manner. So yeah, you're moving from your perceptions of what you'd like to now saying, okay, if this is what I like, what do I need to change? What do I need to do? What is my approach? And so with spouses, if I'm angry about something, I'll discuss it with my spouse in a calm and rational manner. And you say it to your spouse, I'd like to talk about something that's bothering me, that I'm angry about. Remember the language. You can't say, I'd like to talk about something that you made me angry. Because what are you doing now? You're saying to your spouse or to whoever, what you done, you are now responsible for my feeling. You're reversing that. Remember, we are responsible for our own feelings. What the person does, yes, will anger us or make us upset. But the expression of it needs to be, I'm angry, and this is why I'm angry. And so you deal with the issue. As a child, what happens is that parents say to us, you make me angry. And so I grow up thinking, okay, what do I do? What must I do not to make you angry? What must I do to make you happy? And then you bring that into your relationship as well. So notice, and it speaks there of a calm manner. How would you need to change in order to move this relationship into a healthy direction with your children? For instance, if you have young children, I will read parenting books so I can know what they need at each stage of their development. You make a concerted effort to recognize what are the healthy things that I can do. What are the healthy things I can do in helping their development as well? This past week, I'm on a, it's not a diet, I don't know what I am on nowadays, these things are just all, and so you kind of go, then it's keto, a bit of this, and then it's carnivore. I'm sure you've seen all of these things and that, and for what reasons. But I've gotten to a point of saying, I need to abstain. I need to abstain from what? From sugar. From all of those carbohydrates that are so. But for that to happen, there shouldn't be anything in the house. But that's a problem. Because not everyone else is at where I am. And they can control themselves with those things. Whereas if I have one of it, it sets off a compulsive behavior in me. I'm aware of that. And so if it's around me, I can avoid it. But the minute I have a bite, but I can avoid it if there's other people around. But if I'm on my own, and you scalumpies, go off and eat the chocolate no one else is seeing, and those are the kind of compulsions. But I'm raising this because I need to notice it happens at certain points in my life. It doesn't just happen for the sake of happening. I'm either not expressing myself to someone that might have gotten under my skin. And so because I didn't express myself, there's another outlet that I'm trying to find to do what? To make me feel good. And so just notice those things that we do. Food is one of it, but there's many other things as well. And so in that page 2 is for you to then just sit down, spend some time, and you don't have to do it now, but spend some time. How will you need to change in order to move these relationships in a healthy direction? It's asking of us to engage with those who are influenced within our spheres of codependency. It's taking ownership for our own lives, taking responsibility. What are we getting to? We're setting boundaries. That's what we're heading towards. We're setting boundaries. So I attempted setting a boundary at home with some of the sweet things. It's very difficult because they look at you and say, "What's wrong with you? Why do you want to change the whole household now? We've been happy all along." But notice that when there's going to be new experiences, it's going to have a knock-on effect on the house. Remember, people are used to the way you currently are and the way you relate. Now you come with new perception and new experiences. It's going to be a bit of a struggle. And so page 3 talks about building healthy new boundaries. Every healthy relationship is sheltered by boundaries. I think it's so profound, but yet it's so simple. Every healthy relationship is sheltered by boundaries. Protected, if you want to use that word, by boundaries. For codependents in recovery, one of the biggest tasks is to establish strong, healthy boundaries in relationships that were formerly codependent. And so this requires some careful thinking and planning, especially if the other person or persons has unresolved issues. You on your journey of healing, that's not where the other person is at. So you have to be patient with them. I've heard of relationships where someone who's been alcoholic, they've recovered, they still regard themselves as an alcoholic, but they've changed. But because the family unit has adapted because of the person's addiction, now this new person comes back into the family. All of a sudden the family says, "But we can't deal with this person. We're struggling to deal with the person." So new boundaries need to be set for the family as well. And so think about some of the trouble spots and tricky relationships in your life. Is there a particular person who always sets you off? Or persons who always set you off? Is there? Or a co-worker who really bugs you? You may need some special boundaries that will help you function securely in these relationships. Here the invitation is to choose 10 close relationships of which you need to set new boundaries. Write down 10 names in the exercise below. Then go back to each one and write about your new boundaries and how you will put them into effect. Maybe start with one. But I would encourage you, maybe write down some of the names for now. Is there a couple of names that come to mind? Is there names of people that you know of that you need to set new boundaries with? Here's an example from the book. It says, the boundaries I need with my best friend are, I'm available for lunch 1 time a week. That's a new boundary that's being set. Okay. If she phones too often, I will tell her that I can't talk right now. I've got a friend that sometimes phones me, not that often, but just a minute, man. And then an hour later, we're still on the phone, you know. I didn't set the boundary. And I didn't communicate the boundary to him. I think it's important. You can set the boundary, but if the person is not aware of your boundary, how are they going to know? And so I will communicate these boundaries by telling her over lunch in the context of appreciating her and her friendship. So here's a healthy way of doing it. And if my boundaries aren't accepted, I will tell her I need to go and we'll hang up the phone. So I was reflecting on this and thinking, now, how do you do this with someone in your household? Say a spouse. And if your boundaries aren't accepted, you can't just walk out of the house and out of the relationship. You need to find this middle ground. So there needs to be communication and the conversation. How do children know that there are boundaries? It's when you reinforce them and keep on reminding them. What do children do? They push the boundaries. And you have to reinforce. Your family will push the boundaries because they're used to the other you that might not have had the boundaries that you have now. But what do you need to do? You need to reinforce it. And you need to reinforce it. And so in this exercise, the invitation will be the boundaries I need. Remember, these are the names of the people that you would think of. And let's say it's probably sometimes easier just to think of spouse or family member. And so the boundaries I need you put the person's name there. And what are those boundaries? The invitation is for you to then think through, what is that boundary? And then I will communicate these boundaries by telling them what. So now you've identified what the boundary is, who the person is, you've identified the boundary, and now you need to communicate the boundary to the person. And if my boundaries aren't accepted, I will. So you've already thought through this process. Does that make sense? Because I know if I don't do that, I might just say, okay, well, to hell with the boundary. Because setting boundaries is causing more trouble in my life than just being codependent. So what happens? You just fall back into that way again. So it's actually asking you to be intentional here. Name the person, identify the boundary, communicate the boundary, and if the boundary is not accepted, what would your response be? Not what is their response, what is your response? Codependent, I think many times we're always thinking about the person and how we're going to please them and how they're going to respond. Thinking at your own happiness here. But I'm mindful of the fact that I'm thinking about my own happiness in relation with my family's happiness as well. And so one word of precaution, they say, about establishing new boundaries. They may come as something of a shock to other people involved. The people with whom you were formerly codependent will probably be surprised by the new you. And when you explain the new limits of your relationship, you may run across some negative reactions. I think most likely, but let's use the word you may. And that's okay. It does not mean that your new boundaries are wrong in any way. It simply means they take some getting used to. And so looking at the new you, One of the most important new experiences for you is to affirm a new positive view of yourself. I think sometimes we've identified ourselves in the light of what others say we are. And so earlier in the course, we asked you to write a list of things you do not like about yourself. And for most of us, it must have been remarkably easy. Now we're going to write a list of things we like about ourselves. I'm going to ask you to do that now, just spend a few moments. What are things you like about yourself? Don't be afraid to say it or write it down. What do you like about yourself? Some of us finding it harder. God created Adam and Eve, man and woman, and he said it was very good. Things I like about myself. I remember a couple of sessions ago I said to you, I didn't feel like wanting to be nice anymore. Because everyone says, you're a nice person, you're a nice person. And so I regard myself as a very patient person as well, a good listener. And yet all of that, I look back and I reflect and I notice that coming out of my codependency, that experience as well. And so there hasn't just been the negative, there's been good as well that's come out of that situation at the same time. And just being able to identify those things. Are you able to notice that and see it as well? It's when I don't set boundaries for myself that the patience gets abused. Why? Because I allow it. But someone else takes advantage of that. Unless one puts one's foot down and say, no, I'm not going to do that. And then immediately I then rather want to say, oh, I don't want to be a patient person anymore. It's easier to get rid of that than to actually have to say to the person, sorry man, I can't do that. Or what you're doing is wrong. So notice that there's good that's come out of our areas of codependency as well. Then looking at the future. And this is, again, time at home for us to spend. Make a list of the new experiences you would like to have. Make a list of new experiences you would like to have. Don't be shy about this list. They say, remember, if you reach for the roof, you may not make it. If you reach for the stars, you may get past the roof. And it's absolutely true that people who have goals and plans get somewhere. They might not make it all the way to their goal, but they get somewhere. And you can too. Or we can too. And so things I would like to do in my lifetime include what? Is there one or two things that you would like to do in your lifetime? Be surprised. I mean, some people at a very late age in their life still studying, or they're starting to study, or they're playing an instrument, or they're singing, or what is something that you would like to do for you? What's the invitation here? Is new experience, growth, creating opportunities. What's happened? You've restricted yourself because your concern has been for everyone else. Nothing wrong with being concerned for others, but it's when you suppress. I always talk to couples at times when they come for marriage preparation. I say to them, at the end of the day, the family can only be as strong as couples building up one another. And the minute there's children in the relation, what happens? That the children become the focus. But the greatest gift that we can give our children is a building up of the strong relationship between the spouses. Healthy relationship between the spouses. Because that automatically will feed into the lives of the children. And so when the children leave the nest, and there hasn't been that building up, we look at one another and say, who are you? So there's that invitation here, new experiences. And so as you begin to grow, it begins to have a knock-on effect on others. And so an example of a new experience, I'd like to have this week, for instance, meeting with a husband, a wife, or sibling, or friend, a colleague, or parent, and speak openly about my feelings, maybe for the first time, or in a calm manner. That could be a new experience also, in terms of the relationships. And so once you've accomplished this new experience, tell what it felt like. Write down what it felt like. What are you doing? You're setting goals for yourself within these new experiences. If you don't do it, it won't happen. What are you doing? You're confronting. And so the hope is that you will find the courage to step into some positive new experiences on your own, or of your own. Most people are delighted and surprised to find that their new perceptions are true. We think, as they say within the book here, we think you will be too. I think the gift here that we have here among ourselves is that we don't have to do this alone. That we can share some of our struggles in this new experiences, and there will be as well. I'm just picturing us meeting, and I think this is part of the discussion that we will need to have, is as we go through these new perceptions and new experiences and set boundaries, that you can come to a space and say, I've struggled this week. I've had a new experience, I've set it up, but it didn't go too well. And this is what I struggle with. So there's a group that's encouraging one another to, okay, keep at it again. What's the new experience again? Instead of just us meeting, hoping that we'll end up doing the experiences, but there's not the accountability, which is so important. So give some thought to that and pray into that as we head towards the end of this restorative journey. Okay. So we'll meet for half an hour in our groups. And then next week I'm away, I'm on retreat. I'm not in retreat, I'll be on retreat. A group of clergy will be out in Falmouth for the week, but Margaret will be with you leading the session. And then Fiona's away. I don't know when she gets back. In 2 weeks' time. So she'll be in time, I guess, for the last, I think I'm at the last session as well. So she's with her son at this present moment out in America. So yeah, we'll keep her in prayer. Thanks everyone for joining us via the live stream. Please, we can go into groups.